I want to fight the SPLC as hard as I can, but I also want to be fair. And I think sometimes they make it easy by going insane and just by like doing something that is so egregious that I can just unleash on them because it is so horrible.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Narrative. Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and Cleveland.com nominee for the hardest working lobbyist in Ohio, David
Look
Mahan.
at that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Nominee.
Vote for your boy, family.
Nominee, what is that? Sloopy Awards?
The Sloopy Awards. Yeah.
You all could solidify this for me.
Listen, so they did this when I was in Arizona, but it was like the Arizona Capital Times, like best of the Capital. Like everything in Ohio has to be sarcastic. So Cleveland.com used to be the plain dealer has their best of the Capital Awards, what they call them the Sloopies. And some of them are like serious, like David's nominated for hardest working lobbyist. Go vote for David Mahan for hardest working lobbyist. We'll put it in the show notes. I think that's something you can actually do.
Vote 3 times.
You can actually do that.
Right.
It's Cleveland, so you should.
That's what we do.
Right. But then they have things on there like least tech savvy lawmaker, worst use of social media. I mean, it gets
It's like high school.
kind of mean.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's
A shooting star.
For the yearbook photos.
I literally had a state rep say, hey, vote for me. And I was like, all right, bet. Vote for me. He's like, all right, did. Like, what are we, 12th grade? Like,
We got it. Class president, David Mahan. Coming up, ladies and gentlemen.
And I'm going for the most to sound like RFK on an interview. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
he's got the Dark Knight app.
Yeah, right.
Working right now.
Christian Bale grovel.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, we've got plenty to talk about this week. You know, we deal with a lot of bills that just seem like they're so common sense, and it's kind of unfortunate that we even have to see them introduced. And one's been getting a lot of attention this week. Planting a flag at the center of Ohio State NFL. It's just long
The very
overdue
big deal.
Once again, the shooting star of legislators.
I will.
I thought we were going to talk about the LifeWise bill, but we're going to talk about.
I had to deke
You
him
got
because
it,
we
yeah.
talked about it before the show that my thunder was stolen, that I was going to try and slip
You
that
can't
one in.
hate on the game. It was a good move. Bill 700.
Yep.
Right? And it is just blowing up on
Josh
social.
Williams.
Josh Williams.
Our
He's
guy,
brilliant. He's
friend
brilliant.
of the show, brought forward the don't plant the flag. You know, I thought that was too funny.
I was in Ohio Stadium when that happened. I don't know if you
Really?
guys knew that.
No,
but
were you at the game?
I went to the game this year.
Oh my
and,
gosh!
Yep,
we're paying you too much, man. That's
you can thank Papa Andrews. for that.
that's good. That's good. Yeah.
But in all seriousness,
Did you fight?
Hey, I can neither confirm nor deny.
I was wondering what that black eye could
You never know. But in all seriousness, the LifeWise bill,
Yes.
as you mentioned,
Yeah.
this is something that we've been working on as we've seen some school districts around the state try and circumvent the language to allow religious release time instruction for LifeWise and other similar programs. And it's gotten a little traction this week. It's been picked up in the Parents' Bill of Rights, and it's worth talking about so that people understand why we're doing this and where it is in the process as we come down to the finish line here.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, this right now is the crucial moment because number one, both of these bills, the parents, in many ways, the Parents' Bill of Rights, these are two weighty pieces of legislation of just generally protecting the rights of parents to direct the upbringing, healthcare, and education of their kids. And very much related to that, if a parent wants to opt their child into a religious release time program, they need to be able to do that. I think for a lot of us, we were expecting this bill to pass out of committee this week and even potentially pass out of the Senate. But what we've seen is that the opposition is fierce, and I should acknowledge here. I want to thank all of the opponents of the LifeWise bill and of the Parents' Bill of Rights for listening to the podcast, because we're grateful for all the times you take clips of our podcast and post them all over the internet to say, look how crazy these people are. Our social media likes and follows. Thank you for that. That help boost our engagement. But honestly, like I still think there's a good chance we can get this done. We have one more week of legislative hearings, and members are prioritizing this. And even today, Governor DeWine came out and said he supports the concept of the LifeWise bill. But this is where the listeners of this podcast, supporters of CCV, Christians in the community need to make their voice heard, because the left is making their voice heard. They are a very small minority that oppose this, but they're loud right now. And so people need to start calling their senators because the heat is real at the Statehouse right now.
Yeah, this is one, and you always hear this is light versus dark. This is heaven versus hell. I mean, LifeWise versus Satanists. I mean, I know you guys saw in the news that there's a group in Marysville that's talking about starting a release time program in Marysville Elementary School. Actually know of a parent who's got children there. She spoke up about the bill on my Facebook page, and this lady was like, we're going to make sure, your kids get all kind of satanic candy, and, we're going to be praying against you and your family. This is real stuff. And so, over the years, everybody's been complaining about separation of church and state, and they took prayer out of schools. I don't know who they are, but we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to make sure that 30,000 young people get the gospel of Jesus Christ during the school day, not in the school building, but during the school day. And LifeWise has done a phenomenal job of that. And I think when you look at the 99% of parents that support them and the 90% of classroom teachers that support them, one handful of Satanists who probably won't even have a real program.
No.
That what they're trying to do is scare everybody off in lame duck. After lame duck, they dissolve. This group is out of DC or something like that. This, it's a ridiculous ploy. And if your lawmaker is talking to you about how it's working on them, then your lawmaker needs to hear from you about how we need to support LifeWise.
And we've made it super easy for you to do that. ccv.org/HB8, ccv.org/HB8. Takes about 60 seconds to put some information into our form. It'll generate who your state senator is, so it sends them the action alert, lets them know that you want to see this bill passed. And it's super simple, just takes a little bit of time, but it makes a huge difference.
Well, and I think this whole Satanist conversation, religious release time conversation, really puts into stark contrast what I think a lot of this election was about. Why did Elon Musk and all of these people that used to be kind of center left, why did they come around and get behind President Trump, right? Is because they opposed censorship, right? They believed in free speech. They believed in the First Amendment broadly. And this is the real challenge to Republicans right now, is that you love talking about how much you oppose censorship when they're trying to censor us, right? We love speaking out when the left is trying to shut us down. We call them out and say, oh, we believe in free speech. Okay, so the thing about free speech and thing about religious freedom is you don't actually support free speech if you don't believe in this protecting the speech of people you don't agree with.
Yep.
Right? That's right. The reality is you don't support religious freedom as a Christian if you don't think somebody else can choose a false religion too, right? And so this is what it means to be an American. And also too, you don't actually believe in the power of the gospel and the power of light to overcome darkness if you're not like, yeah, go ahead and believe in Satan and watch how the truth and beauty and goodness of the gospel is going to outshine, overpower, and overcome that. So by all means, like, I get it that we don't want to see kids leaving school for Satanist worship. I will tell you, it's not going to happen, right? Or even if like one or two kids happens, right? Like we're going to stop tens of thousands of kids, maybe hundreds of thousands of kids one day from accessing a program like this because we're afraid of what might happen in these other small instances. It's short-sighted and it's missing the point of what makes our country great.
Yeah, and when we have freedom of religion, that's freedom for the gospel to go forth.
Yes.
There might be more for it to contend with, but without government interventions and regulations that are inhibiting what we want to see the gospel do, I mean, that naturally is going to allow other religions to do what they think they need to do.
Exactly.
And just on a side note, I mean, it's not even just about, the religious piece of this. It's about attendance going up in almost all these schools. It's about academic performance going up in these schools.
Yeah.
The mental health of the kids that participate is going up in these schools. And so, that's amazing that we can have both right?
But this is my thing about that, David, is that like people confuse when we argue for religious freedom with that we are, this vague David French idea of pluralism, right? That we believe all ideas and all religions are equal and all of that. No, I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. I believe there is a true religion. I believe there is truth.
One name.
There is one name. There is truth. I also believe people should have the freedom to choose not to follow that.
That's right.
Right? and that's what actually makes our country stronger. And it's no surprise that when kids get release time, their academics get release time to go to a Christian program. Their academics get better. Their mental health gets better. Their attendance gets better. Why? Because now they actually have virtue being instilled in their lives.
Think about this. They are leaving school. They are leaving classes to attend another class.
Right.
Like, who does that? Right? They see the value in it.
Right.
30,000 of them do.
Right.
And their parents.
Right.
And there are families that can't afford or have access to private Christian education, and LifeWise is a pretty good alternative to make sure that they're still getting that while we build up the Ohio Christian education
It's a bridge
network.
until we get them all into Christian school. Let's be honest. That's still where we're going here, guys, right? Because ultimately, we need these kids getting Jesus every moment of every class of every day, right? Let's not get it twisted here. But for those kids who can't get there, LifeWise is a great alternative. But don't get it twisted. You need to get your kids into a Christian school.
Quick plug for Baer Elementary.
Yeah,
that's getting clipped. That's going to be.
Yeah, don't worry.
We're going to find
that'll
that
show up in the next Associated Press, whatever. Come at me, bro.
Well. One story we did want to revisit, we talked about shortly after the election, because with J.D. Vance becoming Vice President-elect Vance, his Senate seat is up.
Yeah.
Aaron, what are you hearing on that? I know we still got some time before Governor DeWine has to make a decision, and you're not necessarily on the inside of that. But just anything in the general sort of discussion that you're hearing about what might happen with the Senate seat that'll be open.
Yeah, there's a few things I can say fairly definitively right now. The first thing I can say definitively right now is anyone who says they know who's going to be is lying, right? Okay. Because I mean, what I'm hearing consistently is it's still very much open, right? The conversation is still very much open. I think there's a number of things that are very much being weighed seriously here. One, obviously, they have to be able to win re-election in 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody is realizing Sherrod Brown is likely going to run again in 2 years. And he's a very formidable candidate, right? He's one of the most talented Democrats out there. And I think everybody has to be aware of that. So whoever it is, in a perfect world, if you were to try to design the perfect candidate, it'd be somebody who's won statewide, who has run statewide, has money of their own.
Been nominated by Ohio as top lobbyist.
Right, exactly.
Let's think about this. Exactly. You wouldn't be around the office.
Hardest working.
There could be some positives.
Has either money of their own. I mean, that was one of the big things that's under. Bernie put in a lot of his personal wealth to make this go. Mm-hmm. Could raise significant funds because it's not. I mean, this was near a $500 million election. Can run a serious campaign because it's a major fight. I think you have to take a serious. I know we have a lot of great congressmen in Ohio. Mm-hmm. But one of the things a lot of people are worried about right now is, President Trump has tapped a number of House members for his administration. And there's a really small Republican majority there right now. So they might not be able to, the difference with a House seat and a Senate seat is the governor can appoint a replacement to the U.S. Senate right away. For a House seat, you have to do an election. And that's at least a 6-month to 8-month process. So if too many House members are taken out of the House, then they actually might lose the majority. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to make it tough to be a House member, even though we have some great House members here. I think a lot of people are worried that Mike DeWine might pick, somebody that's not too conservative. I don't think you're going to get the worst of the worst, right? I think Governor DeWine would want to pick somebody that President Trump and J.D. Vance and Bernie Moreno would be okay with. But again, really anything can happen right now. And honestly, I don't think we're going to know until after the New Year's. I think, you look at Barack Obama, he didn't step down until 2 weeks before the election. Kamala Harris didn't step down until like 2 days before the inauguration. Rather, I said election inauguration. I think you'll probably see JD do something similar to that, unless they have the person solidified and locked in, but either way, I don't think it'll be before January.
Isn't there like an unspoken rule, though, that, when this happens, that the governor should appoint somebody that's very similar to who the people elected?
Right.
Like somebody similar, a MAGA guy like Vance was.
Yeah, no, that I don't think it'll be, the name that gets tossed around a lot. I don't think it's going to be Matt Dolan. Like, let's be real clear about
Jane
that.
Timken.
It could be Jane. Jane's name is very much in consideration. And, again, there's things like that are out there that, Governor DeWine, he has a track record for appointing women. Right. And Jane's a great fundraiser. I know a lot of conservatives have concerns about her, but there's conversations going around. She's probably the top name I'm hearing consistently.
She's raised money for Trump, didn't she?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it when the news breaks, whenever that is. And we're going to take a pause now because, Aaron, I think you need a break. My voice hurts just listening to you talk.
I need some water.
And when we get back, Peter Range is going to tag in for a conversation with Tyler O'Neill, who's an editor at the Daily Signal. He's got a book coming out called The Woke-topus about sort of the whole establishment that's entrenched in D.C. and what Donald Trump is going to be dealing with when he gets into office, and some other articles that he's written. It was a great conversation that Peter and I got to have, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you next on The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian Chamber of Commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org.
And we are back on The Narrative. Mike Andrews and Peter Range, joined now by Tyler O'Neill, who's the managing editor of the Daily Signal. He's also authored a couple of books that we're going to talk about today: Making Hate Pay, The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and The Woke-topus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government. Tyler, I'm excited to have this conversation with you about your work. Some interesting threads to pull on regarding the Southern Poverty Law Center, and thankful for this opportunity to chat with you today.
Oh, yeah, no, my pleasure.
So really, the reason that I wanted to reach out is I read your article recently about what the Southern Poverty Law Center did to Not the Bee, which is affiliated with the Babylon Bee. It's their real news organization, and we'll certainly touch on that. But some of our listeners might know that Center for Christian Virtue has ended up on the Southern Poverty Law Center's radar, specifically on their hate map. So I really just wanted to have the conversation about what is it that this organization is doing? Why are they so nefarious in their purposes? And how can an organization that finds themselves in their crosshairs respond? And I think really the place we need to start, though, is what is the Southern Poverty Law Center? What are their origins, and how did they become what they are today?
Yeah, so the Southern Poverty Law Center began with noble intentions. And Morris Dees, who is the co-founder, started it initially to provide legal representation for poor people in the South. And the very early cases with the SPLC, they were representing Black men who had been falsely convicted of rape, who were going on death row, and they got them off. And they represented a lot of good cases at the start. And then in the 1980s, they started realizing that they could make a lot of money by going after the Klan. And of course, the Klan, horrible hate group. I mean, they are the hate group par excellence in American history. So it was good that they went after the Klan. Interestingly, it was because Morris Dees had a personal relationship. His uncle was a member of the Klan. So this was very personal for him. He started going after Klan groups, and they sued a few Klan groups into bankruptcy. But the lawyers didn't like it. The lawyers thought that it wasn't a good use of their time to go after these Klan groups, because this was the 1980s. We're not talking the height of the Klan here. We're talking barely surviving racist groups that naturally had trouble attracting people, because most people aren't hateful racists, don't you know? You might want to tell that to the left, that people on the right are not all just a bunch of hateful racists.
Imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. But so like the Klan groups were falling apart. The lawyers said that going after them was like shooting fish in a barrel. There came a come to Jesus moment in 1985 when the entire legal staff of the SPLC quit en masse, and they said, we're not going to spend all our time going after the Klan. We want to represent people who actually need our legal representation. And Morris Dees said, well, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And the Southern Poverty Law Center kept going in this anti-hate direction. And at first, it was actually anti-hate. The Klan is hate. And then later they started to expand their targets. And you start to see this in the late 80s, early 90s, but it really ticked up in the 2000s and especially in the 2010s when the SPLC started putting ever more mainstream conservative and Christian organizations on their hate map with chapters of the Ku Klux Klan. And what this does is it suggests that those who, stood for traditional marriage, those who stood for restrictions on immigration or actually enforcing our immigration laws, those who warn about the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, these people were put on a map with Klan chapters, suggesting that the same sort of hatred that leads people in white hoods to lynch Black people is behind conservative causes, whether it's, paying attention to the threat of radical Islamic extremism and terrorism, whether it's talking about illegal immigration, whether it's standing for family values. And they have continued down this path. They've gotten worse and worse, in my view. And it's partially because this was a masterstroke of Morris Dees's fundraising talents. He accomplished two things with this hate map. One, he convinced his donors that the U.S. is far more hateful than it actually is. And so they say, hey, we're monitoring hate. We're the number one organization. Give us money because there's this hateful, there's so much hate out there. You need to combat it. And two, they could demonize and delegitimize their ideological and political opponents. And so we've seen the Southern Poverty Law Center, while they're pushing gender ideology and while they're pushing critical race theory in schools, they also put parental rights groups like Moms for Liberty, like the Center for Christian Virtue, on the hate map to delegitimize their opponents. So what they can do is they can say, hey, look, we're monitoring hate. We have a spike in hate, therefore give us money. And also, we're monitoring hate. And if you happen to disagree with our agenda, guess where you end up.
Tyler, was this a slow rollout? I'm just, I'm confused why they weren't dismissed wholeheartedly when they started labeling these other groups like you're for traditional marriage or you're just for common sense kind of immigration laws. Did they pick on a few groups to start with, or did they just kind of come out and say, everybody's full of hate, let's expand the map?
Yeah, they've been smart about the way that they do it. And that's an excellent question, because they started out with a few activists on immigration. And one of them, actually, I was able to trace down one of their early people they attacked on the hate map. And he's doing completely other things now. But he essentially was driven out of activism in part because the SPLC smeared him. And then, they went from activists who were kind of on the ground, who didn't have the same sort of institutional backing. And then they started going for the more institutional backing people. They started putting like the Federation on American Immigration Reform on the hate map. And then, of course, in 2010, that's when they let the floodgates go and they started to put all sorts of conservative Christian groups, specifically, the Family Research Council, Liberty Council, a bunch of other organizations. And then, of course, in 2016, they put Alliance Defending Freedom on there. So it's kind of been a slow rolling ball, but I think they've realized that they can go for the more mainstream groups on the right because the left uses them as a weapon, and they know that this is just an ideological weapon. They still use it anyway. Their donors don't seem to see the criticism, that they've been getting. So I don't know if their donations have been struggling, but I doubt it personally, because a lot of their donors were from the more far left originally. They were from the George McGovern campaign. That's where Morris Dees first got his list of donors. But yeah, now, I mean, this past year they added gays against groomers to the hate map under the anti-LGBTQ plus hate group label, and they've added groups of doctors who oppose gender affirming care to the hate map. So now you see organizations like Do No Harm on the same map as the Ku Klux Klan, and of course, I think Center for Christian Virtue. I think you were added at the same time as Moms for Liberty, unless it was more recent. I think it was in 2023, though.
I think it was when Mike Andrews joined CCV, actually.
That's fair.
No, I'm just kidding, Mike.
Yep. I just really escalated our rhetoric and really just caused all kinds of inflammatory statements to come out of our communications department. So yeah, that definitely put us on their radar. Well, hearing you talk, Tyler, it seems like this could be a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation, and I don't know that there's an answer to this, but is the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map kind of a product of this divisive culture that we find ourselves in, where you label your enemies as fascists and Nazis? Is it a product of that, or is it a driver of this divide that we've seen in the culture?
I often describe it as the tip of the spear in demonizing conservatives, because I think that there has been this long-term movement of branding conservatives racist, hateful, bigoted. But then the SPLC kind of dials it up to 11 and they institutionalize it. So people who like to say all Republicans are racist, they can use the SPLC to back up that argument. And so what it becomes is, and then the SPLC pushes it a little further than some of even those people might say. But yeah, the SPLC is a useful tool, and it's also pushing their narrative. So I think a lot of people on the left, maybe they really dislike a few issues that conservatives have, but they wouldn't consider everybody equivalent to the Klan. The SPLC makes it easy, because if you want to demonize, say, the Center for Christian Virtue, you can say, hey, look, the SPLC branded them a hate group. Meanwhile, if you maybe are not as aggressive on immigration, you'll ignore that they put the Federation for American Immigration Reform and the Center for Immigration Studies on there. So it's a useful, like, people on the left can use it as a tool. And unfortunately, thankfully, we've seen a lot of their influence decrease. But, because there was a height of influence of the SPLC in 2017 when Charlottesville happened, everybody was going to the SPLC. You saw JP Morgan Chase send $500,000 to the SPLC. You saw Apple giving $500,000. You saw, and then you saw CNN just posting the hate map on their website as a full endorsement. In 2019, there was a racial discrimination and sexual harassment scandal where the co-founder, Morris Dees, was fired and the president stepped down. Of course, the SPLC immediately moved on, and I don't think the legacy media ever brings up the scandal when they talk about the SPLC. But SPLC employees unionized. And actually, one of the interesting things to watch recently has been the SPLC going through a reorganization and employees who are unionized with the SPLC union saying that this is an act of union busting. So they have a whole slew of scandals that often are just brushed under the rug, considered irrelevant. One of their former employees said that the hate map was a highly profitable scam. And my book is kind of based on his revelation and then a lot of other research that I had done. But yeah, it boggles my mind, but they still have a lot of cachet. Legacy media outlets cite them all the time. Democrats celebrate them. And of course, they have a lot of ties to the Biden administration. President Biden nominated an SPLC attorney to a top federal judgeship, and she got confirmed. So this organization, a lot of conservatives like to say it's a badge of honor to be on the hate map, because they have no credibility. But the problem is they're still taken seriously by a good half to 40% of the country. So we can't just dismiss them.
Yeah, and that,
that's a scary. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to just riff on that idea and say, we've struggled with how should we, or should we respond at all when we ended up on their map. And I think, where we landed is it's a serious thing for them to equate organizations with, as you pointed out, a group that is the pinnacle of hatred in the Ku Klux Klan. And them doing that has some real world consequences that we've seen play out in attempts on the Family Research Council and attempted shooting there, or this story that broke with the Not the Bee article, Not the Bee authors being doxxed and having their personal information revealed after they write under a pseudonym. So there are some things that certainly amp up the rhetoric and the danger. And they seem to be fine doing this without any consideration for the consequences that it would cause to other people in these organizations.
Well, so yes, and that is key. The biggest thing is the Family Research Council shooting in 2012, where a man, looked at the SPLC hate map and used it to target the FRC for an attempted mass shooting. As I always say, and he pleaded guilty to terrorism charges. He later told the FBI he used the SPLC map to do this. The SPLC condemned the shooting, but they've kept FRC on the map ever since, even though knowing that this happened. Now, of course, the SPLC does not say to people, you should go shoot up these organizations. It would be slanderous for me to say that was their goal. But at the same time, one of their spokesmen, Mark Potok, said back in 2007 that their aim in life is to destroy these groups, to so mortally embarrass them that they're destroyed. So there is a form of, they're trying to go for destruction here of conservative and Christian organizations. And that is one of the things that drives them. An interesting thing, there have been many lawsuits against the SPLC. And the one part of my book that I wish I could update the most is the last chapter where I go through all the lawsuits. Many of those lawsuits, unfortunately, have been dismissed. One of them was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and Justice Clarence Thomas said he would like to take up the case. He actually wrote a dissent when the court decided not to take it up. But the court did decide not to take it up. There is one very strong lawsuit that you and everybody else on the hate map should be following closely, and that is D.A. King, Dustin Inman Society versus SPLC. This is a case that was allowed to go to discovery. Most of the time, a defamation lawsuit is not allowed to go to discovery because the SPLC is very slimy and they say, oh, this is just our opinion. We're not stating facts here. And they weasel their way out of every defamation lawsuit. In this case, D.A. King had the goods. The SPLC had publicly said his group was not a hate group. And then after they registered a lobbyist to lobby against a bill that King's group supported, only then did they add the Dustin Inman Society to the hate map. So he has a really strong knockdown, drag him out defamation case that is making its way through the court right now. And based on how that goes, I would recommend groups like the Center for Christian Virtue to file similar lawsuits if D.A. King is successful and prevails. But we also have to see what documents they turn up in discovery. I'm in constant communication with his lawyer, who is a really excellent defamation lawyer. He also represented Nick Sandman. He even has a book that I highly recommend called Dismissed. But that case is the one to watch right now.
So one of the things that just drives me nuts kind of in this conversation, you've mentioned it a little bit, is the legacy media seems to prop up the SPLC. I watch PBS, please forgive me, but they're often quoting the SPLC as like an authoritative source on whether or not a group is a hate group or not. This might lead us a little bit into your next book, but it reminds me a little bit of what the State Department does when they want to delegitimize an opponent in another country that they don't like, and they want to prop up their particular favorite political person that they're supporting. And that is, they go after these political opponents and they mark them with certain things that are going to make them unpopular in that country. It seems like we're doing the same thing with the conservative groups here in our own country.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. One of the many reasons why those lawyers quit in 1985 was they also said that they were feeling like spooks, that the SPLC was feeding information to law enforcement, to the FBI, and that it was essentially being used to go after many of these organizations. And of course, this was at a time when the organizations the SPLC targeted were actually hateful. And even then, these left-leaning lawyers were not comfortable with it. I imagine Tulsi Gabbard has a lot to say, and I did actually speak with her about this a few years ago. But she's going to be the director of national intelligence under Trump. Getting to your point, though, the SPLC has been used and in connection with the Biden administration these past 4 years. And SPLC President Margaret Huang actually bragged that the Biden administration, when they got started, came to the SPLC and asked for advice on combating domestic terrorism. And that's one of the major things I point out in my book. In my forthcoming book, The Woktopus, The Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government, because I think the SPLC is one of many of these woke activist groups that are advising and staffing the administrative state that, the Trump administration is going to have to take a close look and make sure that these groups don't have influence in the Trump administration, because they're going to try to undermine Trump from within. But many of these groups, they've been pushing, the demonization of conservatives in the SPLC's case, which, first got me onto the issue. But then also things like strengthening unions by weakening Americans' ability to do independent contractor work, strengthening the teachers' unions and enabling them to keep schools closed during COVID, pushing the green agenda and having a crackdown on fossil fuels. Many of these left-wing campaigns are driven by these activist groups that are seeded into the administration. And then often the administration is also sending money to these groups. So it's a really perverse system, and it's all part of this administrative bloat that we have in our federal government, where most of the rules that Americans have to live by are passed by agencies that are often unaccountable to the people. And Congress and the president need to, take away their authority to pass these regulations, essentially without checks.
And your new book is coming out, 2 days after the inauguration or something like that?
The day after, yes. January 21st.
Okay. So as we look forward to the Trump administration coming in, is there a way to slay this woktopus? Maybe you don't want to give away too much of the book, but is there a way to kind of get the tendrils of the SPLC and other similar organizations out of the federal government?
Yes, there are a lot of things I recommend in the book. Naturally, I think sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the book itself is pretty useful for that. So I'd encourage people to buy it. It is available for pre-order now, even though it's not out yet. But also, I encourage people, when you're voting, you don't just vote on the top of the ticket. You're also voting on who is going to come in. So the number one thing, and this is something that the American people thankfully already did in electing President Trump and giving him, what still looks like a popular vote victory as well as an electoral college victory, which is really huge. But enabling him to undermine the deep state. And then there are a lot of more specific targeted things. So people can contact their congressman to talk about, limiting the protections for the civil service, as what it's called. Unfortunately, and I like the idea of us having a civil service that is not partisan. The problem is it is partisan. And the problem is we have these public sector that are very grotesque. Like even Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the guy who created the New Deal and essentially hypercharged our administrative state, he said that public sector unions were adverse to the public's interest. And these public sector unions have entrenched themselves. They're the strongest unions that exist today. And they, what they essentially do is they make it impossible for bureaucrats to be fired. And even in some cases where the bureaucrats are actually opposing the will of the people's elected president who is over them. And so technically, under the Constitution, the executive branch is under the president. He should be able to fire anyone in the administrative state, and yet a lot of them have these protections that keep them from being fired. I think having some accountability there is one of the big things that we need to do. But also for everyone watching this, and actually I think that the main thing, one of the most useful things that you can do as an American citizen is whenever there is a new rule coming from the administrative state, you can write comments that the bureaucracy has to read. This is every rule has to have a notice and comment period. And what that means is that they go to the public and say, how do you think about this rule? And what you can do from the comfort of your own couch, you can write something that says, I think this rule is bad because, or I think this rule is good because. And you send that into the administration, and you can either help policies that you think are good or hamstring policies that you think are bad. And this is something anyone can do. This is something that you don't have to, there are 501c3 organizations that are not allowed to endorse candidates or endorse legislation, but they still can weigh in on all these regulations. So this is one of the most useful tools in your toolbox to fight the administrative state, to hold bureaucrats accountable.
Mike, I feel inspired today. I think I'm going to start the Northern Poverty Law Center, and I'm going to label the SPLC a hate group. Make a difference here.
Is that a strategic initiative, Peter?
Yes, that is a strategic initiative that I've come up with.
There is an organization out there called the New Tolerance Campaign who kind of already beat you to it. They have a hate map that includes on it all of the groups that the SPLC theoretically should put on the hate map, although they also make it clear that they're not comparing these people to the Ku Klux Klan, which I think is a very important, we want to be absolutely sure. The SPLC, when they do their hate map, they say that this is part of the infrastructure upholding white supremacy. Did you know that? You guys at the Center for Christian Virtue, you're part of the infrastructure upholding white supremacy.
We've heard it enough times that I'm not surprised.
But it's just it's how, and this is the thing that, because I want to fight the SPLC as hard as I can, but I also want to be fair. And I think sometimes they make it easy by going insane and just by doing something that is so egregious that I can just unleash on them because it is so horrible. But I don't want to see the SPLC on a map with the Klan. That's not, the SPLC is doing horrible things, but they're nothing like the Klan, just like you guys are nothing like the Klan. And I think they're worse, obviously, than conservative organizations. They're driving us to hate each other in this country. But anyway, that's the New Tolerance Campaign's hate map. Includes them. It includes Black Lives Matter chapters. It includes Antifa, which the SPLC doesn't include on their hate map for some reason, and Students for Justice in Palestine and many of those groups. So I highly recommend people to check that out. The New Tolerance Campaign is doing good work in responding to the SPLC in this way.
Yeah, and it just seems like at the very basic level that there's a way to engage with people that you disagree with, or even highlight organizations that you disagree with without slandering them. Like that seems like the baseline.
You might think that defamation law should handle things when people are actually slandering people.
My new organization is only going to have one hate group, and it's just going to be the SPLC. That's all. I'll just have a map of the country and one little dot wherever they're located. All right. I'm sorry, Mike. I know you'll never invite me back again, but.
Well, you said that the last time you were on the show, Peter, and then we still brought you back. So I think you're good, brother. I think you're good.
It's been a whole 2 months, though. So that's good.
Well, Tyler, thank you so much for the information and the conversation today. I know you mentioned the book's available for pre-order. Any place specifically you would recommend that people get it, or is it just available broadly where books are sold?
It is available broadly where books are sold. Ironically, the place that I recommend people to order it from is Amazon. I say that's ironic because Amazon for a while ran Amazon Smile, which used the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map as an exclusionary factor. But Amazon has since gotten rid of that program and no longer endorses the hate map. So we'll see. I have hopes. Amazon is still the gold standard for selling books, unfortunately. So you go where the audience is. But yeah, go to Amazon, go anywhere. If you Google Woktopus, it'll be the first result. So far,
and the only result. I mean, that's quite the phrase.
Yeah. Well, there was. I have to admit that there was a campaign from a parental rights organization that attacked Scholastic by calling them the Woktopus. So that one is also one of the results, but my book is the number one result.
The only
because
book.
that campaign is for a while. Yes. And the only book. So.
Well, great. And Tyler, just also want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can follow your work beyond the books. Twitter, dailysignal.com, I assume.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the Daily Signal. You can follow the Daily Signal on all platforms with the exception of TikTok, because we take no truck with the Communist Party of China. And also, you can find the Daily Signal on X, Truth Social, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm Tyler 2, the number 2 O'Neill, because my initials are TWO, so I like having 2s in there. But that's on X, that's on Truth Social, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well.
Well, thanks again for the time, Tyler O'Neill. Great to talk with you today on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.